Everything in life is polarity. We have love and death, we have weddings and funerals. And personally, I've photographed hundreds of weddings, yet I've noticed I intentionally avoid funerals. And not because I'm scared of death, because I'm scared of funerals. I've lost so many people in my life. I've literally grown up surrounded by death. I lived on a farm as a kid, and all the farmers would give us their orphan animals, and constantly they were dying around me. So that was my first introduction to death. And then when I think about funerals with humans, for me it's been really, really traumatizing. On one side, I've got the wogs, I've got the ethnics, and they wail. And if you've ever heard wailing, it just sits in your nervous system, and it's quite frankly horrific. On my British side of my family, at my cousin's funeral, who was the same age as me, 15, someone jumped on the coffin as it was going in the hearse. One of my partners, the first time I met the entire family was at his dad's funeral, and his dad had blown his brains out. And that was my introduction to the entire family, and in another country too. My brother, he joined what's called the 27 Club, and he suicided before I was even 30. And then let's go to COVID. So during COVID, my stepfather passed away. And for those of you that follow me, I'm not going to go into that one again. However, I had to organise a funeral for 10 people during COVID, and he was a TV celebrity. And then early last year, I lost 16 people in 6.5 weeks. So somewhere along the way, I realised I wasn't afraid of death. I just wasn't convinced that what we're doing is celebrating life. And then I read Anthony's book. And what I noticed is it's not a book about death. It was a book about permission. It was about permission to talk, permission to grieve, permission to celebrate, but permission to live. So today, I'd like to welcome Anthony Spark to my podcast. He's a wedding and funeral celebrant, and he's also author of Let's Talk About Death. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you very much for having me, Mel. Love seeing you.
I'm really glad we're going to have this conversation. I said before we went live that I didn't sleep last night. I was very uncomfortable. As you can understand why, I've come from the wedding industry, and you do both sides of that polarity, both the weddings and the funerals. So, you do both the weddings and the funerals. And myself as a wedding photographer, when I was reading your book, one thing that stood out, I know when I actually was with my clients, we would consciously separate our clients from the family and the friends and the siblings and all the people that love to give their 20 cents worth. And normally a couple, when they decide to get married, they set a date, they organize a reception, and the next person they come and see is the wedding photographer. And so what we would do is we'd sit down with the couples and we'd ask them a question. What do you actually want? And we get them to sit down and get a notepad out. And it's like, guys, write down everything you want right now in your wedding. Because let me tell you, if you don't do this now, what you want and what you end up having on the wedding day are going to be two completely different things. And I can say that from experience, right? I mean, my first wedding, I wanted, back in the, we're talking late 80s, I wanted my bridesmaids to have, an apricot, because that was the color back then, apricot bridesmaid dresses. And I ended up with velvet bottle green. And I hated the color green, by the way, but it looked great on the girls. But I ended up not doing anything that I wanted. I ended up having 3 bridesmaids, and I didn't want that. I wanted my older girlfriend just to be the witness. So first time around, yes, I was 19, but I didn't do what I wanted. So this is why I really made sure that I separated the clients from everyone. So when I read your book, I noticed that you seem to do exactly the same thing with families when you were planning, funerals. And so I realized that maybe wedding and funerals really aren't that different. So you stood next to people on the happiest day of their lives and the hardest day of their lives at funerals. So which one do you believe teaches you more about human beings, weddings or funerals?
Definitely funerals. And I've jumped to that way too quick because I love being around and part of that energy of a relationship that's taking that next step of commitment. And that's fun and aspirational. But I think that funerals are significantly more emotional in terms of the broad options of emotions that are available to you. Weddings all about love and happiness and joy and that sort of thing, and funerals is often that clash of celebrating someone's life along with grieving them. And one moment we're laughing, the next moment we're crying, and both can exist in the same moment, even. We flip from one to the other quite quickly. And I think that's what teaches us about life. And I guess that's where the idea of the book came from, is recognizing that we're all going to go one day. And what are we going to do between now and then? How we're going to spend our time and our energy and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because they say death and taxes, but I'm going to say death is the only thing globally, because not every country is doing, people are doing taxes, but they definitely are. In human design always said you are dying from the moment you're born, and most people don't look at it in that perspective, but that's how I actually see it. So all
Right.
right, so now we've got two big days, big events that are happening
Yeah.
that you are a part of. um what people lose their voices at the biggest moments? Why do
Yeah.
we allow people to be, like, so influenced?
I think for a lot of us, it's often a funeral is a lack of experience in dealing with that type of thing before. So I came in to be a celebrant, to be a wedding celebrant, and had to do some study to get qualifications. Part of the study required me to interview funeral directors. I never thought I'd have anything to do with the death industry. That just sounded horrid to me. But it turns out they're a lovely, warm bunch of people who actually genuinely care about people and want the best outcome for the families and that sort of thing. So also the business model is a whole lot better. And you'll know this from your photography, is that people want to get married next year and the year after.
Yeah,
Someone passes, we bury them within a couple of weeks. So
yeah.
the turnover's a whole lot better. But yeah, that's not the motivation for being involved in funerals. It's something I get an enormous amount of satisfaction from. But yeah, for a celebrant, standing up in front of a group of people, no problem. We do that every day. But for an average punter, standing up in front of a group of people is scary as all get out anyway. And then on top of that, they've got this huge range of emotions going through that does cause them to choke up. And I coach a lot of the people that I'm marrying or family of the deceased about what happens when we have that shortness of breath, and the body feels like it's drowning, so we go into panic mode, and so people go, oh, I can't do it, Anthony, you come and take over, and that sort of thing. So I pre-warn them about this might happen, and I'm always your backup, but I won't let you off easily, because this is really important that you do your best here. And if that means you have to stop and step back and take a sip of water or wipe the mucus off your head or whatever it might be, we're doing that. I'm standing right there. I'm smiling at your audience. I'm making sure that everyone knows that we're okay. We're just taking a moment. It's a funeral. It's supposed to be emotional. It's supposed to bring things out of us. We're supposed to be able to express ourselves at a funeral. And that
Mm.
doesn't always come across as healthy, but I have no problem with someone else's grief. In fact, the opposite is worse, when there is no grief, when the
Oh,
people don't have a lot to say about the guest of honor. That's the ones that are really hard to get through.
ooh. Oh, we're definitely going to talk about grief. We are definitely going to go there. Because in my house right now, uh, you know, last night my mum actually asked for a hug and a kiss. And she knows I'm a Capricorn, so she doesn't tend to go there with me often because she knows how I feel. But I was like, did you just watch something that made you emotional? And then I remembered we're in July, and July is a very difficult month for her because this is the month that her son was born and her son's dead. That a husband of 30 years was born, their wedding anniversary, and his death. So it's very emotional for her, and sometimes it's unconscious. It's an unconscious thing. It used to be very conscious. She remembers dates. I erase dates. She remembers them. But now, I think it's just that there's an energy, like I could feel it in the house. There's a big energy happening right now, and I definitely want to go into grief a little bit later. Let's look at the weddings for a moment,
Mm.
because with weddings, and that's something I've got a lot of experience in, because trust me, I've seen people lose their shit on the altar. I've seen people actually end up in hysterical fits of laughter, like the bride or the groom, and it's a nervous laugh,
Yeah, yeah.
and again, you've got the minister or the celebrant or even ourselves, we were always a big part of their day. In fact, I spent more time with the bride and groom than anybody did on that
Mm.
day. um, and we really were, like you, directing the day and what would happen with the day. So sometimes I'd sort of, the things that I witnessed, and I did a lot of Greek, Italian, Masso sort of weddings more than I did the Aussie, typical weddings. But, what do you think is the biggest lie that our culture tells us about, weddings and about death? Especially as an Aussie. I mean, we are a multicultural country, don't get me wrong. And I think that's part of it. But, what do you think is the lie that they're telling us about these special moments?
The lie could be that it's supposed to be easy and simple. You
Mhm.
fall in lust, you get married, and then the shit hits the fan. And I think I was thinking about this idea of a 7-year itch recently. I don't know why
Oh,
that
it's a
popped into
thing.
the
It's a
psyche.
thing. Trust
And
me.
and no, I actually want to do the research to find out, the documentation of statistics of what happens, why it happens, when it happens, and then how does that extrapolate out into the rest of society? A different topic for a different day. But I think we're supposed to, Hollywood romances this idea of boy meets girl, or in the current environment, girl meets girl, boy meets boy, and lives happily ever after. And that's that's the complete untruth of the real situation, that there's going to be issues, there's going to be things. And I don't think we've been particularly well educated on how do you manage those situations? How do you honour the person you've committed the rest of your life to and
Yeah.
yourself at the same time and resolve something that's potentially unresolvable? It's a big deal.
I remember sitting there thinking about, I mean, the divorce rate in Australia is, in the 50 odd percent or something, and it probably should be closer to 70 odd percent, because a lot of people just stay together, for many reasons, multiple reasons.
Yeah,
It could be
yeah.
money, it could be fear,
Mm.
it could be cultural, it could be my children are still growing up and I want them to have a home where the parents are still there. Um, but I can tell you, divorce was way easier to a point, as in, the documentation. I got married in Japan, just to give you some, I mean, I've been married twice. And when I got married in Japan, you're going to love this one. Basically, what I had to do is I had to go to the consulate, get these documents. I had to get two people that had known me for more than a year, right? And get what they call a hanko, which is a stamp that goes on the document, which is like your signature. Okay. And then I hand that over to the local council. And I think we paid $3.50 or something like equivalent of that. And I went with my neighbor to the actual council, gave the documents, and an hour later they came back after the consulate and witnessed them and everything, and I got a letter from the Australian consulate saying I was legally allowed to get married. And they handed me back these pieces of paper that I cannot read a goddamn thing on it, by the way. It's all in kanji, right? And I can't even read the dates, right? And it says that I'm married. And I'm standing there, and I said to her, "What is this?" And she goes, "You're married." I'm like, "My husband's not even here." He was at work, and I got married with my neighbor, right?
You didn't marry
And it
your
was,
neighbour by mistake, did you? It was your husband you actually married.
oh, it was my husband I married. She was just came with me because she could read she was from Hong Kong, but she could read a lot of the Japanese. And I'm like, "That's it?" And she was like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, that was an easy one, but I did elope second time round. Because first time around, I did the traditional chapel. Well, because I'm not religious, I'm not of no denomination, so I did a chapel wedding, even though I wanted to get married on the beach first time around, and I didn't want to wear the fancy, wedding dress. And if you saw my wedding dress, oh my God! Remember late 80s? Well, puffy shoulders, lace. It was terrible, right? So second time around, after getting the document to say I'm legally married, my husband and we flew to the Maldives, and it was just the two of us. And, I was literally swimming with turtles off my balcony of my bungalow 2 hours before I got married. And it was really, you know, it was the two of us at this time. We didn't want any family drama and all of that sort of stuff. And this time around, I wore, more of what I wanted, the simple, plain, more of a cocktail style dress. I didn't want the puffy. I didn't want it back in the 80s. You just couldn't get what I wanted unless it was couture back then. So, thinking back on all of this, I'm going, you know, why are we not doing weddings that we actually want? Like, what is that? Why are we doing weddings that everybody else wants? Why are we not doing what we want?
That's a really good question. And I wonder if part of it is the age that we get married at. Because I, love weddings so much, I've been married twice. And the first one was a more traditional 100 people, three-course meal, band playing, all of that, just cha-ching,
Right.
cha-ching, cha-ching. And the second time around, Andrew and I did what we wanted. And we live in southeast Queensland now. Most of our family, all of my family are in the southern states, and she's got a bit of family down there as well. So we did what we wanted, which was the first time was with my first wife's family pastor. And I actually said to him, I said, mate, I don't want to disrespect your religion. Our beliefs are somewhat different, but I don't want to say things that I don't mean because you asked me to say them and I repeat them. I just don't, out of respect for you and your religion, I'd rather not do that. And he basically lied to me and said, Anthony, if there's no God, there's no marriage. And I was quite keen on getting married. So I said, okay, I'll say whatever you want me to say. Turns
Okay.
out that was an absolute lie, and one that many that man would go on to say, which again is another podcast. But at the time, I was very much guided by the people who knew what they were doing. Whereas, as a 50-year-old, no, I'll have what I want, thank you. I'm going to
Yeah.
have my immediate family. We're going to have some kids, but not a lot of kids. That was a moment of contention for a few people. But
That's
one
a
of the
big one.
relatives, one of the
Mm.
relatives was just freaking adamant about his stepchildren coming, and I said, mate, I don't even know your stepchildren, and he kept going on and on and on about it. I kept saying, no, no, no. Listen, not your wedding. You got married quite recently and you did whatever the heck you wanted to, and that's totally okay. But you can't now tell
Mm.
me how I should have my wedding. Um,
Yes.
and that's a bit of an issue. And I think it was more about his wife saying, I want my children to come to this. But no, yeah, as an adult, as someone who's a little bit more mature and a little bit less caring about other people, saying it's okay for me on this day, I can do what I want. I can have what I want. Me and my wife or fiance or whatever they are at the time, you get to do what you want to do, even if it's just for this day. Other times you may have to be a little bit more forgiving for other people and that sort of thing. But today, no, I'll do it the way I want to. And I think that's where we fall into the trap of the traditional wedding. On top of that, the bloody marketers who tell you you've got to have certain things to show that you love. We went to a wedding. Andrea's favourite nephew married the woman of his dreams, and they've been together 10 years and 4 kids, and we just love them to death. And they printed bottles of red wine with their name on the label. It was just fabulous. Of course, I'm blind without my glasses on, so I sat down, cracked the bottle open, hadn't realised that it was a gift rather than to drink there and then, and got in all sorts of trouble because they were selling booze over the bar, and I'm drinking the gifts. Didn't mean to offend anyone, but shit happens. But I think we get lulled into that idea that you need to do all these things. You need to have
Mm.
the string quartet, and you need to have the, uh, you know, second time round. It wasn't intentionally a budget wedding, but we just didn't spend
Mm.
any money because we didn't do all the crap.
You know what? I totally get that because first time around, I did the tradition like you. And then after that, was when I got into being a wedding photographer. Then I ran wedding expos. So, of course, I know about all that crap that you're talking about, right? I mean, look at the wedding
Mm,
magazines, and you're supposed to have bonbonieri, and you're supposed to do this, and you need to get that, and you need to pay for this, and you need to do that. So, with you, like I was 19 the first time round, second time round, I was, I think, 36. I'd been with my partner for 8 years. And we went, oh, fuck this. We're doing it the way we wanted. We didn't want any dramas. And we knew that we would have dramas if we invited his family. And the people we wanted there couldn't afford to go and do what we wanted to do. And I went, you know what, this is about us. And that was when that decision was to elope. And again, it wasn't about having a budget wedding, but boy, did we spend all the money on us, and we had a bloody brilliant time. And even though we still got married, on the beach. I remember it had been raining for 10 days solid, and we're on this tiny island, and the sun broke out, and we're like, whoa. And everyone was on the beach watching. And so there was all these strangers there, and we had the chef actually make us this massive meal on the beach, and we gave the cake to all of the staff. And I was like, I didn't even want the cake, but it was part of their package. And like it is about, it is interesting when we are looking at, these traditions and I'm supposed to do it like this and I'm supposed to do it like that and I need to spend this much money. I mean, it is a bunch of bullshit, really, because I can tell you after hundreds of weddings, mine was awesome. It was one of the most relaxed weddings I've ever been to. And it
yeah.
was, like in my case, it was something we wanted and it was just us. Now, if I did it again in my 50s, I'd probably do it different again.
Of course
It
you would.
would be completely different because I'm different. And is that what you've
Mm.
noticed with people? Like, are you doing first time, second time, third time round weddings as a celebrant? Tell me about that.
I tend to do, and I think it's my age and demographic is that I tend to have a lot of people getting married for the second time, and
Mm,
they're way more relaxed than the youngies. The kids are often quite anxious and that sort of thing, which is fine. It's an exciting day, but the ones who are going the second time are way more relaxed and blasé about it, and don't give a shit about the small things. They're there for a reason. It's not to
mm,
impress anyone or look a certain way or whatever. In fact, I've got one this afternoon and I'll be there for probably 20 minutes. And 10 minutes of that will be the actual service, and the other 10 will just me getting there
it's a
beforehand,
relaxation.
shaking hands, making sure everything's in order. We go out the backyard of our house, we get married, and then I leave. Really simple and easy, but it's his second time round. It's not her first. But they just want something really simple. I love the big hurrahs. I fair dinkum if there's a big wedding occasion, they've got all the bells and whistles. I love that if you want it, but there
Yes.
shouldn't be an obligation to have that. It's a little of the De Beers diamond. You should spend 3 months of your gross income on your fiance's diamond
Yes.
ring. What a
That's
crock
an
of shit that
article.
is.
What a crock of shit. I know. It's like, who came up with that? Oh, you know who came? Yeah, they did. Their diamond ring was
Yes,
exactly De
yeah.
Beers. I know. It's just like, what? I mean, second time around, I didn't even want the engagement and the wedding ring, right? And so my partner actually, he'd asked me, and oh, what would you wear? And I've always said, I'm shocking with my jewelry. I'm always smashing my hands, and I never get my fingernails done because they'll last like 20 minutes. So I was like, oh, for me, I always like something that's encased. So that way I can damage it and it's going to be fine. I'm not going to have the stone constantly falling out. I didn't want the big bullshit. I mean, I chose my own diamonds in my first ring, but second time around, I was like, nah. And funnily enough, I was not expecting to be proposed to second time around. Let me tell you, shock. I don't remember a bloody word he said to me. I was in such a state of shock. And you know, it was, I mean, it was romantic, don't get me wrong, in a way. We're in a Ferris wheel on top of this building in
Oh.
Osaka. Yeah, and he's got down. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's messing around in his pockets. I'm like, you're missing the view. Like, what is wrong with you? And then all of a sudden he brings out this box and this ring. I don't remember a goddamn thing after that. Like blank. It is just blank because I was like, because for him, he had I want, like a checklist in his life before he went there. And we actually had ours went on for 8 years about my name. So, when we talk about tradition, right? Because I've been married before, I have the surname McDonald. Okay. And for me, I'd had that for most of my life, more than I'd had my maiden name. And I created a business out of my surname. So everyone knew me as my nickname was Melmac, and my business was Melmac Productions. And, I did that in my early 20s. So for me, I had an identity that I created with that surname. And he would meet every freaking person that he'd come across. He'd be like, like if she ever gets remarried again, she's not changing her name. She's refusing to do it. And they're like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, but, that's her ex-husband's name. And it's like, well, I don't think that's how she sees it. And he'd try and get them on his side. Now, this went on for 8 freaking years, by the way. And no one ever agreed with him because, I'm like, but I don't associate it with him. This is my identity. I made something with my name, right? So if we go back to tradition for a second,
Mm.
let's talk about that because you know we are people say we've got to do it this way, this way, this way. So when you sit with your clients, is that what you do? Are you asking them what are they going to do on the day, and is this what they want? Like, are you really getting into the nitty gritty with them beforehand?
Not from a nitty-gritty perspective, but after they've signed the paperwork, I want to introduce them to their guests by whatever name they're going to take on. So obviously, after you get married, you have to wait for the official certificate to be processed through birth, deaths, and marriages in your capital city. And then you take that document and your license and you go to the license people, which is TMR in Queensland or Vic Roads in Victoria, and you say, I want to change my license, and they can do it on the spot. And then you take those two documents, your new license and your official marriage certificate, and you get your green Medicare card updated, and then you get your passport updated. Once you've got those three things done, you can do anything. You can change bank accounts and properties and all that sort of stuff that needs to be done. So I asked the family, how do you want me to introduce you? And I had one couple who were just so much fun. They wanted to be devoted lovers for life. So they
I
didn't want
like
a
that.
title, and they were going to join their names together
Yep.
officially, but that's how they wanted to be introduced to their guests. So only for that reason. But in terms of whether you want to change your name or not something I want to get involved in.
Okay.
Something I'm happy to chat with people about should I, shouldn't I? And
Yeah.
there's no correct outcome. There's
Yeah.
no yes you should or no you shouldn't. That's not how it works. But it's a conversation worth having. And
Mm,
from your example, probably more important to have the conversation about why,
mm,
not just you should change your
yes.
name to my name or something different, your maiden name or something. Why is that? Is it because you perceive that being married is an ownership thing where you get to possess the
Mm,
other person and because
mm-hmm.
another man has possessed her before you and what's that all about? That would be
Yes.
the line of questioning in that scenario that I'd be exploring. If someone wanted to explore it, if you don't want to, don't. But if it's an issue, um,
Yeah, he
let's
said
see.
to me, because I said, why should I change my name? And he said, I'm proud of my name. And I went, yeah, you're proud of your name. Doesn't mean I'm proud of your name. I'm proud of my name. And first time around, I didn't know that I didn't have to change my name. I was like, what? I went through a year of doing all this paperwork and stuff, back in the day. It was seemed to be quite a feat to get it done. Not so difficult as you just explained now, but I was like, yeah, like, why do you want me to change the name? And yeah, it was quite interesting. And then of course, you've got people that say, oh, I want my children to have the same name, and I'm like, well, we're not having children, so that's not an issue. And
Hmm.
if you want the kids to have your name, fine. They can have your name. This is my name. So yeah, it was an interesting conversation, hence why I was in such a state of shock, because he knew after 8 years she ain't budging. And I never did, which was convenient since we got divorced, 3 years later. I didn't have to change my name back. However, yeah, it is a sort of, yeah, why are people doing it? I think is the thing, because first time around I did it because I thought I had to. Now I may still have done it because I wanted to, but I actually did it because I thought I had to. And it was not conversations you had back in the 80s, whereas,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a good food for thought today for people to think about that. Um, now, when I had couples come to me for the weddings, intuitively, sometimes I could just feel that this couple are not ready and this is not going to work.
Hmm.
So I would discreetly refer them on to another photography company. So that was my tactic. But have you ever stood beside a couple on their wedding day and quietly wondered, should they be getting married?
Yes, I think we've all, even people who aren't celebrants or in the industry would see couples and go, "Really, you're getting married? That's kind of interesting." And I had one couple when I first started. I had met a young couple, and we're sitting around having a coffee and a chat, and I'm saying, "So what do you love about him?" Oh, well, he's. Oh my God, I just went, oh, this is like pulling teeth. This is really hard. And the same in reverse. So I think they were the classic young couple, first, not first relationship, but first serious relationship, and they're in lust, and
Mm-hmm.
they're just, God, how do I keep this good feeling? Let's get married. And then we get soaked up in all of the excitement of preparing for a wedding, that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
they rang a couple of months later and said, no, we're not going to go ahead with it. Um, he's had an affair, which was a surprise in itself. But I thought, thank goodness for that. Thank
Mm.
goodness they haven't done it. At the same time, I've met couples to chat about the wedding. I just thought, I don't know. And then I see them on their wedding day and I go, no, I was 100% wrong. My intuition was incorrect. These guys are just freaking awesome. Now we'll see in time and, in the next 10, 20, 50 years. But there are couples that I've looked at and gone, clearly he or she was having a bad day when we met the first time round, because
Okay.
they're actually there's one young couple that I just thought he was a bit of a drop kick. Um, and just standoffish and a bit of a smart ass and a bit of a too cool for school. And she was just lovely. And I went, oh shit, and she was actually pregnant. And
Mm.
when I married them, he was the sweetest guy ever. I just thought, man, you are going to look after this woman so well. She's going to lean on you. You're going to be a rock for her. I was happily really wrong with my assumption of where you guys were at as a couple.
Uh,
Very happy for both of them. So, it's I thought at one stage that there was perhaps um, a television show called I Will Marry You. And the television show is based on John and Julie Gottman's research of, are couples going to stay together? And it's how they deal with conflicting situations. Do they
yeah.
get too carried away with the winning the argument, that sort of thing, or are they a bit more forgiving to each other and communicate well? And at the end of the show, I would marry people, and I thought that probably needs to be a business before it's a television show. And then I thought, how the hell do I know if someone's going to stay together or not? I can
Yeah.
have the assumptions of what I think, and not you alluded to this earlier. It's not just staying together doesn't mean success.
No.
It's staying together and having an outrageously good life. Because if
Yes.
you're just staying with someone for the sake of the kids or because it's comfortable, I don't want to do that daddy nap bullshit stuff. If
Mm.
that's your reason for not separating, It's not a really good reason, is it? And it's not a successful relationship.
No, and I love the word you said, the outrageously good love. I mean, I believe everyone has the right to experience crazy, stupid love. And when I say stupid love, I'm meaning it in just in that outrageous way. Like, you know, even though like we've both been married twice, right? And or divorced twice now. However, I wouldn't change a bit. I would do it all again, and I would definitely marry both of them again. If I had to do it all
Mhm.
over again, I would do it again because I got to experience some beautiful stuff. You know, 19, maybe don't suggest doing that. Hello. I'd probably suggest waiting until you're way, way in your 20s. That's my personal opinion. However, because I found that, in my relationship, and I was with my first partner for like 5.5 years, um, what I noticed with us was, we just ended up wanting two different paths completely. And I didn't get to understand that until we got that little bit older. So that's why I suppose now the way I look at marriage, um, is quite different. Look, don't get me wrong, as a wedding photographer, I've seen it all. I mean, I've literally been at weddings where, and I've had it both ways, where the bride or the groom has said, hey, thank you everyone for coming. We're at the reception, by the way. So they've done the whole day, we've done all the photos, and they're like, thank you all for coming. Make sure you grab your gifts on your way out because the bride is screwing one of the bridesmaid, one of the groomsmen, or vice versa. I've seen it all. I mean, I've actually had even a bride and groom die on the wedding day on the way to the actual
Oh,
reception, and they
gosh.
got hit by a car, and that, like, I have experienced a lot when it comes to weddings. So,
Mm.
you um, when I looked at the ones that the cup, where they've gone through the day, I mean, I had a belief system that sometimes people don't need to go that far to break up. What do you think about that? They've gone all the way to the reception and then they break up, so,
Yeah.
well, how are you feeling about that? I mean, it was full on, man, let me tell you.
It's kind of crazy that you'd allow things to go that far. And there is this temptation to avoid uncomfortable situations. So if I'm in lust with my fiance and she's looking at my best mate with those same lustful eyes, I probably need to have a conversation with one or both of them about what that looks like and what's going on
Mm,
there. And you can't you can't change who you're attracted to. So I think about there are moments in my life with my first wife where she was great friends with some of my mates, and there are times I'd go, geez, if I wasn't around, these two could be a thing, and that's not a bad thing. That's not
mm,
negative. It's just if you've made a commitment, you honor the commitment, and there was nothing untoward going on there, but it was just something I was casually aware of. But to let it to get that far before you say pick up your own gifts on your way out, I mean that's just insane. I went to a wedding with my first wife when we were just dating, and
mm,
the very good friend of hers who was getting married had kind of let her know, she was a bridesmaid, that she wasn't all that fond of her fiance. And so we it's interstate, so we travel interstate, and I'm saying to her, listen, we can, have you been to Adelaide before? We can go to Adelaide and just fuck off for the weekend, and I will take your phone, and I can't remember, we had mobile phones back then, but I will field all the calls. She had
yeah.
family coming in from overseas, and there, everything was there, and it was on, all that sort of thing. And I said, we can book a flight right now. We can get out of here, just the three of us, and we can go and have a lovely time. It's a beautiful part of the world. And she decided that it would be easier just to go through the wedding. And then, of course, 12 months later, she was divorced.
Yeah.
Um, it
Yeah. I
blows
questioned
my
it.
mind.
I
Sorry?
questioned my first one the night. It was like 2 days beforehand, and specifically the night before. I questioned it. And I was 19 at the time, and I'm thinking, oh, my parents have gone into hock for this. So I just need to go through with it.
Mm.
I had a man turn up on my doorstep, and the night before, and we went down to the beach, and we had, we caught up, and he was my best friend, and my husband was, or fiance at the time, was quite jealous of our relationship because we'd grown up together, and I'm sitting there going, am I doing the right thing? And like, shit. There was that. It is, yeah, it's hard. I think it takes a big person to turn around and do the right thing and go, hang on, maybe we do need to postpone this. And that's that whole what everyone else is thinking, and all that shit comes into play.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
The other thing is, I don't think it's unhealthy to think, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right space for me to be in?
mm,
And when you're young, you'll often pander to a lot of other people's needs, which is why your suggestion of maybe wait till the left and right hemispheres of your brain meld together before you make lifelong decisions, which is closer to late 20s than late teens. Um,
yeah,
but I think it's quite healthy to say, am I doing the right thing? Because we can get caught up in the emotion of, I just love, love, love. I'd do anything for this person. This is my person. They complete me and all that shit.
yeah.
Sometimes you have to say, am I actually doing the right thing? My father said to me before my first wedding, like months before, he said, listen, if you ever change your mind, you just let me know and I'll take care of it. And I'm like, Dad, what are you talking about? That's crazy. But in hindsight, I really appreciated that from him, because I could have, if I'd changed my mind, I could have said, Dad, listen, I'm not feeling that great about this. I don't know if I want to go through with this. He would have managed it and
Yeah,
protected me from a lot of the onslaught that's no doubt going to come from making that
yeah.
sort of decision. And my first marriage went well for almost 20 years, and we kind of hung on for a little bit longer than that, knowing that it was doomsday. I just was a little bit stubborn and didn't want to give up without having a red hot crack at saving it. But it
Oh, I
was
think it's good. Have
it
a
was
red hot crack.
unsavable. It was a similar thing to what you were talking about, where I wasn't 19, I was early 20s, but your life changes, and so you kind of pivot one way, and you just hope your partner kind of pivots the same way. And we did a lot of that, but there was one stage where we just and
Yep.
then woke up one day, and I said to her, I said, "We're okay, right?" And she goes, "Yeah, yeah, we're fine." And then 2 days later, no, no, we're not fine. And it was almost like she dropped all the hints that we weren't fine, and I missed them. I'm a bloke. You've got to hit me in the face with the truth. Your dropping hints doesn't work for me.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
need.
Women need to learn that shit. Like men, just black and white it. Just come straight out with it. My husband knew that if I was dead silent, mind you, he was shit his pants. He's like, "Oh, she got a lot to say. She's lost her." I actually would get laryngitis, and that's when he'd really shit himself. He's like, "Oh, she's holding a lot in right now," and then eventually it was like, "Boom!" I've learned much better. It's like, I would have just say it as it is, because men don't do color well.
No,
No.
no, just
Yeah.
tell us the truth.
So, how do you feel about, and I don't even know if it's still the legal sentences that need to be said, but, the words until death do us part,
Yeah,
how do you feel about that?
I feel very strongly about that, because I included them in my wedding vows when I married Andrea. And no, it's not a legal requirement anymore. There's 4 lines that you have to say to each other to be legally married. But I wanted to let her know that I'm in this for the long haul. I am here till my last breath. I'm going to be your husband, in as much as I can control that as possible, because it takes two to get divorced. And so you can just stubbornly hang on saying, I'm not going to divorce you. Well, no, that doesn't make any sense at all. But I
Mhm.
like the idea. If it's not going to be the lifelong commitment, don't get married. And that's okay. It doesn't need to be, but I'm a till death do us part kind of guy. So I think that's terrific. I've got a wedding coming up in next month, and the bride sent me an email a couple of days ago saying, because they were talking about just doing the legal vows and then doing some personal vows on top of it. And I said, yeah, absolutely, do whatever you want. So long as those 4 lines are done, I've done my job. And then she said, oh, can we weave in the more traditional, uh, I, Anthony, take you, Mel, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day, for whatever it might be. But they included the till death do we part. I said, absolutely, we can put that in. it's not a legal requirement, but I'm a fan. I like the
Yep.
idea of I'm not fucking around here. This is serious. Um, if I
So your wife
say,
is now stuck with you. That's it. Who's
yep,
going
yep,
first?
bad luck, baby.
Well, my mum did 30 years and, she did experience till death do us part. She's still, like, what are we now? 6 years since her husband passing. And, there's still tears and, there's still like some days she really misses him. And, so, like, why are we so fucking bad at talking about death? Like, what is it?
I think there's a couple of really good reasons for why we don't want to talk about it. One of them is that if we talk about it, we manifest it. So if you and I talk about death too much, maybe one of us is going to die.
That's mum's
But
belief. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sad reality is we're both going to die, Mel, whether we talk about death or not. It's not going to accelerate the process any further just from speaking about it. So it's kind of one of those things that you don't do. But we
Mm.
don't talk about death. We don't. It's just something it's not even written down. It's just assumed. Oh, let's not talk about it. One of the things I'm quite certain of is if I've lost someone, my mum passed in August last year, and we just scattered her ashes a couple of weeks ago. And I loved my mum, as we all should, and was thought I'd be relieved because she'd had dementia for quite a few years when I got that inevitable phone call, and I wasn't. I was broken. It was just dreadful. And when we scattered her ashes a couple of weeks ago, I've got my brothers and sisters with me, and I've got my extended family and kids and cousins. It was freaking awesome. And we're in this little cafe, and then we walk over the road to the beach, and I fell apart. I wanted the sand to swallow me up. I remember thinking, I wish I could be anywhere other than here because it was so heartbreaking. But I want to talk about my mum. I don't want you to avoid the conversation of talking about my mum because you're out of fear of making me upset. Because that's actually not the fear. It's not the fear of making me upset. It's the fear that you'll have to deal with me being upset. And how are you going to manage that? Because sometimes
Yeah.
I think we all feel like we've got to fix people. And this is a very blokey thing to do. But if someone's upset, it's my job to make them feel better. So we say stupid stuff like, oh, but she had a good life. Or at least you've got your health, or at least your kids are, all that comparison bullshit stuff. And the reality is when we're feeling lousy about something, we just want to be heard. We just want to be understood by another human being. We don't need to be fixed. So I think there's that. Well, let's not talk about death because I might upset somebody who's lost somebody, and let's not have that conversation because it'll bring up old wounds and so on. Uh, I think if we made it more okay to A, for men feel emotions, and B, be okay with expressing them without it being uncool or you must fix me or that sort of thing. I think that would be a real benefit to society.
I remember the day that mum yelled at me and she's just like, I want to talk about your brother. No, but none of you talk about your brother as if he never existed.
Mm,
And she was right. We
mm,
none of us spoke about my brother dying, losing, my mum is the most gentle, loving freaking soul you're gonna meet. And like the whole, for me or for all of us, we never spoke about him. And it's not because, he did shitty things when he was alive. It wasn't about that. It was because to see her break down, and the wailing that came with it being the walk, it was, it is, you're right. It's like, oh, I don't know how to fucking deal with this, or I don't want to fucking see this. And well, this went on for decades, by the way,
mm.
right? Because, my brother was younger than me and he died, when he was, around 27. And it's been a long time. And it's like, oh, you want to talk about him. And so, when I was putting all the pictures up in her house and the spare room, is where I would sleep, I actually put my brother, the photograph I took of him, I actually put it smack bang outside my bedroom door, so if I'm there and I open the door, he's there looking at me. And, I suppose we all mourn in a different way, but I know for
Mm.
me, I actually hadn't spoken to my brother for 4 years before he passed, right? I was fucking pissed. I was pissed off at him, and one of the last conversations I'd actually had with him, he said, um, how are you sober? What are you doing? Like, how did you do this? You know, and we were like twins. We thought like twins. We knew how to poke the bear all the time, and we just fucking brawl. And quite frankly, I'm going to drop the C bomb. He could be a serious C bomb. In fact, actually, we used to use the word ankle because we call it lower than a cunt. Okay, so I mean, my brother could be an ankle. Let me tell you, he really could. But the person who died, right, is not the same person I grew up with. So for me, I had already been mourning my brother personally. This is how I see it. I'd already been mourning the death of my brother before he was fucking dead, you know. Um, so you know, do you, how do you see that? I mean, can someone die emotionally or, psychologically or physiologically and relationally before someone physically dies?
Oh, absolutely. And let's not pretend that there's a difference between grieving the loss of something other than someone who's died. So, for example, I grieved the loss of my first marriage. I felt an absolute sense of worthlessness and who the hell am I if I don't get to be Father of the Year and married? There was such a huge part of my identity, and I felt
Mm,
like I'd let my kids down terribly by not being successful in this. And you look back on it, you're going, no, it was successful. We had a couple of decades. In fact, when we were divorced, I'd been with her more than half my life. So that's a
mm,
fairly serious chunk and worthy of grief or a
yeah.
sense of loss, and acknowledging that. I didn't quite understand at the time, but in hindsight, you go, of course I was grieving. That was a huge part of my life. And then at a similar time, uh, not related, I'm sure, my business took a serious dive. And that was all of a sudden, I went from being a successful small business owner to freaking broke looking for jobs with dickheads who, I wouldn't have employed once upon a time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think, the sense of loss you can feel through a loss of a relationship is quite similar to that sense of loss you feel when you lose someone because they've died on you.
Thank you for
And,
saying
and
that.
yeah, the two aren't, they're very similar. And that was why, my example of my mum was she'd had dementia, and I'd mourned the loss of this wonderful woman because when we had conversation, it was just the same conversation over and over and over, and
Yeah.
trying to keep her calm because she could feel her brain not remembering and would be
Mm,
searching for it, and it would actually cause her some anxiety. So I'd try and be distracting her. And this went on for years, of course. Um,
mm.
and so, yeah, I'd done a fair bit of grieving beforehand, and then there was a different type of grieving when the time actually came.
Yeah, I'm my last marriage was 11 years in total altogether, and yeah, I actually, that's how I would describe it. And people look at me, I go, this man that I was with, I do not recognize anymore." And to me, it was like he died. In fact, and it was nearly, I used to say it'd be easy if he was dead because it felt
Mm,
harder. But the man that I knew and the man that you know just the beautiful parts of him just fucking didn't exist anymore. I said someone will fall in love with this version that's standing in front of me, but they will never get to experience the absolute magnificence of a man that you were, that I have known for 11 years of my life, that I feel honored to have known for those 11 years of my life.
mm,
Um, so okay, some celebrities, and also happened, in my family where, they were grieving, or I should say, they had a partner who was slowly dying, and then the partner passes, and not long afterwards, and we've seen this a few times with celebrities, they end up meeting someone else, and then they fall in love and they get married within a very short, what looks like to everybody else a very short period of time. So like, can someone finish grieving before the person they love has actually died? And is that okay? Because some people just don't think it's okay. I mean, we're
Yeah.
judging people harshly here for moving on, aren't we?
Um, yes. But again, this is, I think, one of the expectations of, for goodness sake, Mel, you're supposed to grieve for 6, 12 months or so before you date anyone else or something like that. And
Mm.
I'm a classic example of someone who didn't do that. I had been with one woman for so long, I didn't legitimately didn't know how to talk to another female other than in the friend zone, because that's all I had for 20 something years.
Mm.
And so whilst I was still married and recognizing that the relationship was not going to end well, we were in a bad place, and we'd done counseling, we'd tossed around all sorts of scenarios and what ifs and how abouts. Um, but I didn't know how to speak to someone. Anyway, I caught up for a coffee with a girl by the name of Andrea. And I said to my eldest son, I said, I think I've got a date. Like a week after my ex-wife and I had separated physically. So the relationship had kind of finished some time ago, but we'd physically separating. And I had a coffee date with Andrea on Friday, and I said to my son, I said, I think I've got a date this weekend. He goes, what do you mean you think you got a date? I said, Zach Dix, his mum, we knew each other, we were friends. We're having coffee, and he goes, when? And I said, Friday afternoon. He goes, that's a date. I didn't know, and I'm googling, I'm YouTubing, how do you talk to women? Uh, you know,
Oh
and bloody YouTube takes you to all the pickup artists about it. It's
my
just
God.
getting nailed
Yes.
on the night, and that's the whole the
They
jam.
don't, they don't
And
get
that
it.
wasn't where I was necessarily at. But we started dating and didn't stop. And
Mm.
the my feelings of I've just freaking rushed into this
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Before being married, was never single for very long. I always managed to slip into another relationship. I thought, all right, what's wrong with me that I can't be on my own? Um, and I went and saw counsellors, and I got some support and figured out that it's actually okay. I can be on my own. I quite enjoy my own company. We lived separately for 3 years till my
Yes.
youngest finished high school, and then we moved
Mm.
in together. And that was healthy for me as well, to have that space that was just mine, and to recognise that just because we moved quickly didn't make it wrong. It's
Mm.
just that's the way it worked. And and I swore black and blue that I'd never get married again. I mean, I was
Yes.
crushed. I was never putting myself through that pain again. And Andrea thankfully was okay with it, and
Yeah.
then we
It's
decided to get married
interesting.
anyway.
I do remember, I don't know, but maybe it was a decade ago. If I known you that long, it's maybe more longer than that. But I remember being at an event and you were in the room, and I remember seeing you, and I saw her, and because I got some serious spidey senses, and I was like, oh, damn, this got, yes. Oh, they're into each, and I knew then and there. And that's the thing, like when I've been with my long-term partners, within the second time of meeting them, I have just known. And it's interesting because people always ask, how do you know? I actually had a client in the middle of a client meeting. The third person that was there goes to the toilet, and he leans over. And we're in a serious freaking business meeting, and he leans over and he goes, I need to ask you some questions because you're older than me. I'm like, okay. And he starts talking to me about dating. I'm like, we're going from corporate to dating. Okay. And I'm thinking, all right, I don't know. He just knew to ask. And he's like, how do I know when she's the one? And it was like, oh, you will fucking know. I said, it's nearly like a bloody road train goes over the top of you. Mind you, the same thing happened to me when I knew my marriage was done. I literally felt like a semi-trailer drove over the top of me, and I went, oh shit, I think we're done. And then I mourned, that happening, and attempted to ignore the signs. But I was like, man, you're just going to know. And you sit there and, yeah, I'll never get married again. I will never fall in love again. I will never, never. And I'm just like, like, why? Why are we saying that to ourselves? I mean, even me, I mean, I've done plenty of dating, and I've been with, plenty of people, and I've been married and divorced. I would never now, in my 50s, I would never say never. Like, why? Why would we say never? Okay, so then we've got the oh, you're being part of the corporate system and the legalities and like all that bullshit, right? But I feel like it means something completely different to me today than it did back then. I used to laugh and joke and say my first marriage was my sober marriage because my husband got me fucking sober, let me tell you, right? And the second one, I called it the visa marriage because I was living in Japan at the time and I had to keep going in and out, in and out, in and out with the visas. But that was bullshit, really. I mean, we've been together 8 fucking years. I could have spent the rest of my life with both of them and never got married per se. But the way that I'd see it now, again in my 50s, would just be, so different. And then I look at people that, they're, going back to, your husband or your wife has passed away, and the question is, can loving someone new, you know, can it actually honor that person that's passed away? Because of those conversations, like someone's like, oh, you can't be with anyone but me. But then you got other people that say, I want you to continue your life and, have love. I mean, my mum and stepfather, 16 years age difference. That's a generation,
Mm.
right? So, can loving someone new honor that person?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it's about honouring that person. I suspect, just my opinion, of course, which take it or leave it, is one of the things that we spoke about at the start of the conversation was a desire to live an outrageously good life. So having a great life. And if you can find someone who amplifies that in your life,
Mm,
go you. That's the freaking jackpot. That's where I'm not going to say nothing else in your life matters, but if you find that person who helps you live this outrageously good life, you can't help but have good things happen around you.
mm,
So part of me having an outrageously good life and my wife having an outrageously good life means that if something happened to one of us, the other would genuinely want that person to continue to live an outrageously good life.
yeah.
And that, if that means having somebody else in their life, I think it probably does. I think we're both people who like to be in, when we love being in our relationship. But if Andrea was for whatever reason not with me, I would at some stage of the future want to be in another relationship, because that's one of the things that is important to me in terms of having a great life. And I was talking about how I'm okay being by myself. I don't want to be an old man on my own.
Mm,
And that it may well happen that way, but the good things in my life are better when my wife's there with me, or if she knows
mm.
about it, or if I can tell her about it, afterwards or whatever. This happened and all that sort of thing. It just amplifies that joy that I may have had. And so she would want that for me if she wasn't around, and I would want that for her. So I don't think it's about necessarily honouring that person. It's they were such an important part of my life that they would want me to go on and enjoy whatever's left of a great life.
Yeah, I love my own company and I'm very comfortable being alone. And when I am, it's a choice. So I've chosen to do that. However, I believe that as humans, we're here on earth to experience crazy, stupid love and to connection. And
Mm.
it's that connection, and so I never understand people that, they've had their heart broken once and they're like, that's it, I'm never having another relationship, and they don't, and I just feel like they're missing out on what it is to have a
Yeah.
human experience.
But I think going back to the discussions around grief, is that we don't want to feel that grief again. So I took a
Yeah,
chance. I went out on
yeah,
a limb. I loved someone and I was rejected, and God, that rejection hurt.
yes,
I'm not going to put myself through that again. I think that's where a lot of the young men in particular come from, an angle of not wanting to ask girls out, because girls can be devastatingly harsh to break poor boys' hearts of saying, no, I wouldn't date you. Have a look at
mm,
yourself. And so
mm,
young men just don't freaking take the risk anymore. We go, it's not worth the outcome.
yeah,
My decision to to not get married again after going through a divorce was entirely selfish. That I just didn't want to feel that pain again. I made the same decision. I'll never run my own business again. I'm just going to work for other people, and that was never going to fulfill me.
Yeah.
I have to be my own or responsible for my own outcome. So good, bad, or indifferent, I take responsibility for what that looks like. Which
Yeah.
makes me a fairly poor employee because I always think the boss is a bit of a dick and I could do things better.
I'm the same. I'm much better working for myself.
Some of us are
I'm the
just
one
built
that
that
tells
way.
them that.
Yeah, which doesn't always end well. But no, I think we avoid that feeling of grief
Yeah.
because we don't do grief particularly well.
Yeah.
So if we did grief better, I think we'd take more chances. We'd ask more girls out on dates. We'd
Mm.
perhaps take a risk on a business that may or may not work. We'd perhaps put ourselves out there a little bit, knowing that the shame associated with not succeeding is actually not that bad. It's a little
Mm.
uncomfortable. It should be a little uncomfortable, but I will, I'll be able to get on with it. I'll be able to cope with that grief or loss or however you want to categorize it. I'll be okay.
Yeah, the grief, it's a hard thing. I know before my stepfather passed, again, intuitively I was like, oh, I actually think, we're getting, like he's getting closer to that time. It was just an intuitive thing, right? And so one day, mum had left the house and I sat with him and I grabbed my mobile phone and I hit record and I sat down. I said, we're going to talk about your death because it's going to happen, and the odds are very high it'll happen before mum dies, right? Unless she gets hit by a car. So, I want to discuss all of this with you now because I just, it was too much, like the two of them to have that conversation seemed to be really difficult, because of that mentality of if I talk about it, it's going to happen, right? If I don't talk about it,
Mhm.
it's not going to happen. I'm going to delay it, kind of thing. So I ended up doing that. So, what conversation, does everyone pretty much leave too late to have with someone?
Where do you start here? From a business perspective, prepaid funerals are something I'm really keen on because it means you get to
Mm.
lay out what you want to have happen when the time
Mm-hmm.
does come. But I
Mm-hmm.
think I think being humans, we're really good at avoiding pain and looking for comfort. And comfort means not having uncomfortable conversations, regardless of what they look like. So if there's someone in your life that you're disconnected from and maybe you're grumpy with, or maybe they're an ankle or something like that, um,
You like
just
that one?
consciously think I'm using that one. But being able to have those, is there a relationship I need to mend? Is there something I need to apologize for? Is there something that I need to say, in spite of this aspect of your personality, I'm going to love you anyway, whether you say that out loud or through your actions or whatever. But I think there's things that society suggests to us that this is important. It's really important you're successful in your business. It's really important that you drive a nice car. Well, you know what is really important is that the people around you who you love know that they're loved, and you remind them again and again and again that you love them, that you just are grateful to have them in your life,
Yeah.
because all that other shit is just shit.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
relationships is the good stuff. That's the juice, baby.
it is the juice. Oh God. I mean, as I said, I didn't sleep well last night because, I was thinking about all of this and I am constantly questioning everything that I do in my life, constantly, and
Mm.
going, all right. So I did everything a bit back to front. So I went straight into the marriages at a very young age, with my partner from 17. And then, I ended up spending the last 15 years doing the dating, right? So instead of doing the dating, then doing the marriage, I did back to front, But I realized eventually, you gotta crawl before you start running, right? So I went back to that. Um, so I've even gone and looked at that, going, am I stopping myself from having a relationship with somebody? Like, am I ready for that? Have I done that inner work to go, this version of me, I'm gonna like, am I holding back? See, even as I'm trying to say this sentence, can you see how I'm stopping and going, and I'm questioning it, going, what is this? The grief, yes, the grief scares me. The grief of losing somebody that I truly love, and whether that's in death or that's in divorce or in a relationship breakup, yeah. But then I have to keep reminding myself that, fucking this is worth it. This is worth it. I remember telling a friend in my 20s, when she's got a voodoo doll and she's pinning it with her ex, and, she refused to date again. I said, this pain is worth it. And at that time I had chosen, and the word is chosen. I'd been aware, and I was the only person that was aware that this particular person I had in front of me was sick, and they hadn't told a fucking soul that they were sick. Right? Were hiding that they were sick from their entire family. Always has, right? And I knew about it because I was their one night stand, and it was the first time I'd had one. And this man held me, so tightly, like I've never been held in my life. And he just blurted out what he's been doing, right? He's paying cash for everything and his medication. And, I could tell physically when we were in bed together, he's moving every couple of minutes because his body's in pain. And, he was in remission, but the reality was he didn't know, what was going to happen. And I had to make this choice, all right, I've just met this guy. Do I want to take a chance? And this could be a short time or this could be a long time. And I made that decision and I decided to continue the relationship, and it was faced with me like fucking right here. You couldn't get any closer if you tried, right? And so for me, it's, it was worth the risk. And I think I have to keep reminding myself of that, every time I feel that little pang going, that, at the fear I think that we've created and the grief and all of that, it's like fucking push past that. It's okay. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's fuck. Even just saying this, I'm sweating now.
It's sometimes worth reminding ourselves that the only time that we get to be truly proud of who we are and what we've done is when we've done something that is uncomfortable, that is a stretch, that's not easy. Because if it's
Mm,
easy, if you're going in athletic events against primary school kids and you win, there's no glory in that. You haven't done anything. You're a freaking adult. You're running against children. That's no victory. You don't get to be proud of that. But if you stretch yourself and get uncomfortable and do things that make you feel a little bit anxious and you get through that, that's when you get to be proud of yourself. That's when you get to say, yeah, I did that.
yeah.
Look at me.
Yeah. Oh God. And statistically there is a percentage of people um on the planet. I think it's like 10% of people will never ever ever have a relationship of any sort. And that's sad. To me, it's
Mm,
huge. And I'm like, that's sad, because it's so fucking amazing.
mm,
It's such an amazing experience, Um, but throughout this entire conversation, we're talking about tradition and love and grief and stuff like that. Everything keeps coming back to me about permission. And I said that at the very opening, that to me, when I read your book, it was really about permission. Like my mum has written, we've redone her will, and in the will, she's written, at my funeral, I want this music and I want no black. Like no
yep.
fucking black. No one's allowed to wear black to a funeral. And I just went to a funeral recently, in the last couple of months, and I actually contacted them going, hey, I avoid funerals. I don't really go to them. It's pretty rare I've ever turned up to one. And I'm like, am I supposed to be wearing black? It's a wall funeral. What am I doing? So the whole lot, this is, like through weddings, it's, you're trying to get permission from your culture and your religion and your parents and, tradition and stuff like that. And then in death, to me, it's, it's permission to not wear black and to laugh and to cry and to fucking celebrate. Because going back to the beginning, for me, I just feel like people aren't celebrating, people's lives, and what you said in your book, is, and what you've said through this whole podcast so far, is permission to live our lives. And that's really fucking powerful, Anthony. Like, do you think the greatest gift that you can give someone, it's not love, but maybe it's permission?
Possibly. I mean, yeah, I think part of our responsibility as humans, being connected to other humans, is to create an environment where it's okay for you to express what you want and how you want things. Now, I'll put a caveat on that
Hmm.
because I'm not a left-leaning socialist who thinks everyone can have everything they fucking want, because I just don't think that's the way society works.
No.
One of the things that I take responsibility for is that I have a responsibility to society to leave the planet in a better place than I found it. So one of my roles in this life is I've got to do my best to make the world a better place, which doesn't mean you give people permission to do whatever the hell they want, because
Hmm.
that's not
Hmm.
making the world a better place. We don't
Yeah.
need unlimited free will. We live at the best time in human history. I don't think there's any question about that. But that doesn't mean you get to do whatever the hell you want, whenever the hell you want to. And you don't get to have all your hedonistic ideals exactly the way you want to, and that sort of thing. But I think we need to create a space, and I guess I'm thinking in particular about my children, is a space for them to be okay with losing and winning and being wrong. And I think being wrong's a good one, because I think
Mm.
quite often when we're arguing about something, we're arguing to win the argument.
Yeah.
We're not arguing to find out what the best outcome might be. It's very much about, if I win, you lose, so bad
Yeah.
luck. Uh,
Yeah.
I get to be the victor. So I guess it's a permission thing again, where it's okay. I need to be okay with not being right sometimes, which is terrifying. But if it means that the right solution presents itself, well, then that's a win. We all get to win in that regard, rather than I win this argument and you lose this argument, but actually you were right, or the truth was somewhere in the middle. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
permission to allow, but I want to put some boundaries on that. That if I'm a pedophile, if I'm a born pedophile, I don't get to take out my feelings on children. That's not
Yeah.
okay.
No, it's not.
Um, you know, or whatever it might be, whatever your thing might be.
I know in relationships they say, "Do you want to be in love or do you want to be right?"
And they're
Yeah. I
completely different. Yeah.
know.
We
So
talk
I,
about, in my relationship, we talk about there's me, there's Anthony, and then there's Andrea, and they're both really important independent humans. But then there's us, and the
yes.
relationship of us is the priority. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we dismiss our individuality and what we want in this world, but if we've made a decision that there's three elements to it. There's me and her and us,
Yeah.
and we want to create an environment where us gets better. And along the journey, she and I just get to enjoy the ride. Like, how
Yeah.
cool is that?
Ah, I love having someone in my life to enhance my life. If they're not enhancing
Mm,
my life, fuck off. That
yeah.
because that's what your partner should do. It should enhance your life. But we're two individuals. We in relationship. Coaching. Not that I like that word. We say we've got two different kinds of relationships. We have the A relationship and we have the H relationship, right? In the A relationship, when these are the people that say, oh, they complete me, and I'm missing someone, and they're leaning on each other. When you're leaning and one person leaves, it crashes. But when you have two people that are in the H relationship, they are strong individuals, and so when one leaves, you're still standing nice and strong. So coming together is an enhancement in your life, and I think we've really freaking missed this.
Mm.
With weddings and funerals, like some people are spending a fuckload of money on them, are they spending more time on a day? because it's only one day, by the way. I used to say there's a fundamental difference between a wedding and a marriage. Just saying, right? So, do you feel that people are spending more money on this one day, for either of them, and not enough time creating a beautiful life?
Yep, yep. And I mean, planning a wedding is fun and it's sexy and it's exciting. There's so much to do, and I've got to do this and do that and meet this person and choose this, and all of that busyness is really, it's fun, it's exciting. And planning the rest of your life with someone, it's such a bloody unknown that I think most of us don't think about how we're going to do that well, which is another society thing about, I don't know that we spend enough time sharing information through generations to say, well, this is what used to work well. My father told me once, he's on his third wife, and I did tell him 3 strikes you're out. If you you don't
My
make this
dad's on his
relationship
third
work.
wife too. I
Sorry?
think he's got it right. My dad's on his third wife. I think he's
Yeah,
got it right.
yeah. um, but I remember chatting with him once about divorce, because when he divorced my mum, I was about 5, or when they separated, I was about 5, and not a lot of kids in primary school had divorced parents, so it was new
Mhm,
territory for me, and I didn't understand it. And
mhm,
we were talking about divorce one day, and he says, "Look, the only reason more people don't get divorced is because you can't afford to. It's expensive." And I went, "Oh,
mhm.
that's interesting." You just take what your parents say as gospel,
Yeah,
and I don't necessarily agree with him in hindsight. But it's a valid point that once upon a time it was just too bloody expensive. He's born in 43, so end of World War II. Economically, not a great time. It got better
mhm.
over time, and then went through that explosion in the 70s. But for a long while, it was hard work, and people didn't have a lot of excess money. So getting divorced would have been more taboo, and the stigma attached to being a divorcee would have been significantly worse. Whereas now, I think we're a little more comfortable with the fact that you can get divorced pretty
Yeah.
quickly, pretty easily.
You can do it pretty quickly. I've seen people get rid of people entirely in two weeks. So, like the money side, because there's obviously two sections. You've got the money, and if there's children involved, you got that, and then you've got the legalities a year later. But it was like, boom, how do I do this in 2 weeks flat? I'm like, whoa, okay, all right. So I want you to imagine that this is your funeral
Mm.
and somebody is writing a eulogy.
Yep.
What do you hope that they got right if they're writing a eulogy for your funeral?
I'm really comfortable with talking about my eulogy because I'd like to think, and I don't get to control it, which is terrific, but I'd like to think that if I go before Andrea, that there's something in there about the relationship that we've had, and what an absolute um, blessing she has been in my life, and how much richer my life is because of our relationship. I would be devastated if my children didn't have some input about what an okay job I did as a parent, and an okay job not through effort, because I think I've tried hard to be a good parent, and for the
Mm,
most part I have 3 beautiful children, and I've managed to get a stepchild along the way, which has been terrific. So I'd like to have that somewhat acknowledged, and then I'd like to have people from different parts of my life have a little bit of input, whether they're doing their own tribute or it's part of the eulogy. So I am a part of a little ocean swimming group who
mhm.
I'm really fond of these people, and we get together 2 or 3 or 4 times a week and have a swim in the ocean. Then we go and have a coffee afterwards, and we joke about we only swim so we can have a coffee, but we just get to have really nice conversations. And I
Mm,
popped a note into the group uh, recently. I'm swimming less, I'm running more, just for a couple of months, and I popped a note into the group saying I won't be there tomorrow, I'm struggling, and that was all it was. And one of the guys sends me a message saying, "Hey mate, what's going on? Are you okay?" Like within moments
mm,
of me sending it, and it was private. It wasn't in the group. And I said, "Oh, I apologise. Bad language on my part. I'm fine. I had a long run and I'm physically exhausted. So I'm struggling
Mm.
physically, emotionally. But I thought, how cool is that? That I get to be a part of a group of people who give a shit enough about each other to reach out and say, hey, mate, you're all good. Are you okay? Do you need to talk about something? Want to catch up for a coffee or whatever? So my ocean swimming group, very important group of people. My Toastmasters community, very important group of people. I do some volunteer work, important group of people. You'd like to have little bits and pieces I couldn't give two shits about Anthony drives a nice car or has a nice house or left his kids a packet of money or whatever. The kids aren't going to get a
Mhm.
packet of money, but it's
Spend it
the
all.
relate it's the relationships that I've invested in which are far more important to me. But it's that stuff. No one gives it. I mean, it's lovely to think you might inherit a small fortune and that sort of thing, but all that shit is empty and probably spent within a generation or two. But if you can share great life lessons and experiences, and as you say, create opportunities, or give permission to other people to have their best life, then that's a life worth living, isn't it?
Yeah, I like that. I did see in your book you wrote something. You had a will and you had a well, and I
Yeah,
like that. I was like,
yeah.
ooh, yes, because I've actually said that to people, and the well being that you are handing out some of that will money or inheritance while you're still alive and get to see them spend it. Correct?
Well, there's a couple of versions of the will. One of which is you get everything at the end, and sometimes it's I'm leaving you a specific amount of money, or when I'm alive, I'm giving you a specific amount of money because I want you to go to this place for the weekend. I went there 20 years ago. You'll have a blast. But the well is more about for the next generation. You get to share your well whilst you're alive, so you get to share your wisdom and
Mm.
and that requires you to be wise in the first place. So if you're a dick sharing experience and wisdom, that's not going to work well. The E is for the experiences, create an experience for the next generation. And I say the next generation because I have kids, but for those people who don't have kids, it's not just about yours; it's about the community. And if we're going to leave the world in a better place,
Yeah.
um, then we better do that. And then the L's listening and love. So listening to people, which is, one of the buzz things. That means listening without creating the answer whilst I'm listening to you speak. Oh, I can't wait to jump into next and because I've got something I need to say. No, it's just shutting up and listening. And sometimes that
Mm.
means that after someone's spoken, you've got to think from, oh shit, I need to come up with an answer, because that's the way
Mm.
conversation works. And then love. It's that tell your kids you love them, tell your brothers and sisters you love them, tell your parents you love them, tell your extended family you love them. Just fucking tell everyone you love them. If you do, don't leave it up to chance
Mm.
because you may not get the opportunity. That'd be
Yeah.
tragic.
I mean, none of us, we don't own that magic 8 ball, do we? It's like, oh, is my time up now? We honestly don't know. Okay,
Mm.
so, what's one question that every kid should ask their parents while they still can? Well, it's a tough one, I know. It's
It
like,
is a tough one because I'm thinking about it more from the parent's perspective than from the
hmm.
child's perspective. Because to flip that, it's more about what is the question the parent needs to ask the child,
Well, that
which
was my
brings
next
about.
question.
Was it? All right, we'll go back. We'll go back to your one. What's the question a
We can
child?
do it either way, it's fine.
It might be something as innocent as mum or dad. What is it that you love most about this world outside of me and my brothers and sisters? Because they're going to go, "Oh, you, darling, you're the most special thing in my life."
Yeah,
But
it sounds like mum.
outside of that, what does that look like? To try and get an inkling of. The example I want to use is my father's second wife, and he would holiday at Noosa every August school holiday. So this is going back not 50 years, but pretty bloody close to it. And we'd drive the Ford up with five kids going sideways in the back of the Ford with the station wagon seats down and that sort of thing. 21 hours straight to a car park, a camping ground at the end of Hastings Street in Noosa, which is now a car park. And we'd pitch this big ass tent. And I remember it was it was we were doing something for Dad's birthday, which was the wrong time of the year for it. Might have been Father's Day, but my stepmother said to me, "What would you like to give your father for?" And I had no freaking idea. And then I thought, what does Dad love? Money. I'll give Dad money because that's what he loves. I mean,
Okay.
such a and he did. He really enjoyed money, but that wasn't like he'd be devastated if he knew that that's what I thought as a 9-year-old boy, that he loved money,
Mm,
that was the most important thing to him. And
mm.
I thought $5 would pretty much cover it. That was a lot of money for me, and he'd
Back
really
then.
appreciate that extra $5. Yeah, wow. So yeah, I think children asking their parents what's important to them, and parents understanding that this is a pivotal moment, which is going to give them some focus on where they're going to spend their energy. Because
Mm.
I don't know if it's as strong for females, but for blokes, it's you better make some cash, mate. You better make the only way you're going to be successful is be successful in business or work or employment or whatever that looks like. As such, it's kind of it starts there and then everything else filters off around that.
Mm, very interesting. I like that. Well, okay. With everything that you've witnessed and everything in this conversation, my question to you is whose life is it anyway? So, whose life are we having?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's again, it's twofold because it's not just my life, in my opinion. It's how my life impacts the people around me and how that filters out through my family and then my extended family and my friendship group and then my community and then what does how does Sunshine Coast benefit from my life? So we are connected human beings, and that extension to Sunshine Coast goes throughout Queensland and Australia and then the world. So we can't be all things for all people, but our actions have an impact on all of those things around us. So if everyone on the Sunshine Coast is an ankle, then the Sunshine Coast becomes a pretty average place to be.
Yeah, it's so
And I'm tempted
true.
to say something nasty about the Gold Coast here, but that, that that stuff extends, beyond. So if the ankles can be outweighed by the generous good people who are contributing to society, then that's the direction that we head in. So I think it's your life to live how you want to, but choose carefully
Mm, because
because
what
what you
we
do
do,
matters.
yeah, it does matter. It affects other people and yeah, and the environment that we're in. So true. Oh, love it, love it, love it. So today, guys, I don't think our conversation was really about weddings or funerals. I think, it was about remembering the biggest the big moments, the weddings and the funerals, that they don't define who we are. They really reveal who we've chosen to become. So maybe the real question is, how do we want to get married or how do we want to be remembered? Maybe the real question is, are we living a life that's recognizably our own? How are we impacting the people around us? Because if we can answer, yes, and, then maybe ceremony after that, is about the reflection of a life that's actually been lived authentically. And I think that's what we really aim to be. Anthony,
Mm.
thank you so much for joining me today. I know I've taken a lot of your time today and I really appreciate it. This is a conversation I feel there's just so many fucking layers that we could just keep going on and on and on and on. But thank you very much. How do people get a copy of your book?
I have a website called sunshinecoastfunerals.com.au. There's a tab on there saying buy my book. It's pretty in your face. You can order it from there. And in fact, on that website, there's a free PDF download if you just want to get a PDF version. I've been old school. I like a physical copy, but If you
Yeah.
just want the information for the sake of the information, the PDF's there for anyone who thinks it might be of interest.
So, for anyone that is questioning about death or even about marriage, they can find you. I'll make sure that I put the link underneath. Thank you again for joining us. And until next time, guys, bye from us.